Here are the 10 richest Filipino families in California, and the empires they have built are absolutely wild. We're talking about two friends who refused a $3 billion cash offer from Mark Zuckerberg, and a widow who beat both Wall Street and the French government, and a billionaire so invisible that there isn't a single photo of her online. Let's get into the full list. Number 10. The Evangelista Network. Let's start with someone you've probably scrolled past on Instagram without realizing you were looking at a one-woman corporation. Because most people see Heart Evangelista and think, oh, a fashion influencer with really nice bags. And that right there is the most expensive misread you can make. Here's what's actually going on. Heart built her first pile of money through a long, carefully managed career in Philippine entertainment. But acting money has two problems. It gets taxed into oblivion, and public attention fades fast. So she did something most celebrities never figure out. She pivoted geographically. She climbed out of regional TV and straight into the ultra-exclusive world of European luxury, becoming an ambassador for the biggest houses on earth: Dior, Chanel, Yves Saint Laurent. That's not fame anymore. That's high-margin international income. But the real genius is where she parked the cash. Instead of leaving her money sitting in volatile emerging markets, she aggressively bought premium real estate in California. Think about how smart that is. By planting a physical footprint in the Los Angeles property market, she basically built herself a vault that appreciates while she sleeps, completely insulated from whatever chaos hits Southeast Asia's economy. So when the public looks at her feed, they see a woman shopping. Financial analysts see something totally different: a hyper-efficient marketing operation with zero inventory, global reach, and profit margins that would make a Silicon Valley CEO jealous. She isn't a consumer of luxury at all. She's a corporate entity quietly extracting capital from the world's oldest fashion houses and burying it deep in California dirt. She turned attention into real estate. Our next woman turned something far more boring into a fortune: the simple problem of finding a decent babysitter. Number 9. The Marcelo Syndicate. Quick question. What's the one thing every wealthy working parent in California is secretly terrified of? Not the stock market. It's leaving their kid or their aging parent with the wrong person. Sheila Marcelo looked at that fear and built an empire on top of it. She didn't invent a microchip or a flashy app. She looked at the American economy and spotted something everyone else ignored. The entire high-powered workforce secretly depends on a second, invisible workforce: the caregivers. Nannies, babysitters, senior care. And finding a reliable one was a nightmare, so she founded Care.com and basically digitized and corporatized the whole multi-billion-dollar care economy in one move. Now here's the part that made it unstoppable. She built a two-sided marketplace, and those have a magic trick called the network effect. Every new babysitter who joined made it more valuable to parents. Every new parent who joined made it more valuable to caregivers. Once that flywheel started spinning, it didn't just grow, it became a near monopoly that competitors couldn't catch. Then she pulled off the perfect Silicon Valley exit. She took the company public, survived the brutal scrutiny of Wall Street, and eventually sold Care.com to the holding giant IAC for roughly $500 million. Just like that, she converted a high-stress CEO grind into pure liquid cash. But she didn't ride off into the sunset. She immediately became a venture partner, planting herself deep in the California 5C world, where she now decides where the next generation of money flows, backing female-founded startups and Web3 companies. And here's what people get completely wrong about her. They think she built a website for babysitters. What she actually built was the digital infrastructure of trust. She monetized the background check itself, becoming the gatekeeper for who gets to walk into the homes of America's richest families. Marcelo sold trust. Our next family sells silk, and they run it with the cold brain of a Wall Street banker. Speaking of something that quietly earns its keep every single day, that's what pulled someone on our team to the Pulse R8 Smart Ring. It tracks your heart rate, your sleep, and your workout straight from your finger. A week on a single charge, 100 days with the little case, and it's fully waterproof. The part that got us was the price, under $40, a fraction of what the big-name rings cost, because it comes direct instead of through the retailers that mark everything up. If you're watching on your TV, pause and scan the QR code on screen with your phone camera, or tap the first link in the description. Because the next fortune was built by a woman who ran a fashion house like an investment bank. Number 8. The Notori Fashion Fortress. Here's a fun twist. The woman who built one of the most enduring luxury brands in America wasn't a fashion school prodigy. She was the investment banker at Merrill Lynch. Josie Notori understood global financial modeling years before she ever touched a single piece of fabric, and that is exactly why she won. Notori spotted a gap nobody else saw. Back in the 1970s, lingerie in America was either purely practical or cheap novelty stuff. There was no luxury middle ground, no high-end sleepwear for women with real money to spend. So she took the gorgeous, intricate hand embroidery of her native Philippines and walked it straight onto the floors of the wealthiest stores in the country, Saks Fifth Avenue, Neiman Marcus. Premium positioning from day one. But the way she protected that empire is the masterclass. While her competitors outsourced manufacturing to random third-party factories and prayed for quality, the Notori family owns their entire supply chain. They built their own massive factories in the Philippines, so they control every single step, from design in New York, to stitching in Manila, to distribution in California. That total control means they guard their designs fiercely and keep their profit margins sky high. And here's the move that makes the accountants smile. Geographical arbitrage. They pay their manufacturing costs in Philippine pesos, but they collect their revenue in US dollars, aiming straight at the high disposable income shoppers of the American West Coast. Cheap to make, expensive to sell, and they own both ends. Now the fashion industry is an absolute graveyard. Brands that were everywhere one decade are bankrupt the next. So how did Notori survive for over 40 years? Simple. They never chased trends. They built a timeless, recession-proof luxury machine, governed by the cold, calculating logic of a banker who happens to sell beautiful things. Notori built a fortress out of fabric. Our next family is the oldest dynasty on this list, and they treat Silicon Valley like their personal science experiment. Number 7. The Ayala Silicon Valley Pipeline. Here's a mindset that separates truly old money from everyone else. When you reach the very top, you don't fear your current rivals. You fear the teenager in a California garage writing the code that will one day destroy your entire business. The Ayala family understands this better than anyone alive. The Ayalas are the oldest, most aristocratic business dynasty in the Philippines. We're talking centuries of control over the nation's banking, real estate, and telecom. They are the definition of established power. But here's what makes them dangerous. They refuse to sit still and rot. Through their venture capital arm, they've planted deep, heavily funded outposts right in the heart of California. So how does it work? Back home, they run unshakable monopolies, collecting telecom fees, banking interest, and rent from millions of citizens. That's the cash engine. Then they take that money and fire it directly into Silicon Valley, funding early-stage startups in artificial intelligence, fintech, and logistics. And this isn't some billionaire casually playing angel investor for fun. This is a calculated defense system. By buying equity in the very startups that could disrupt traditional banking, they guarantee that no matter how the future unfolds, they own a piece of it. But the real power move is how they use California, not as a place to make money, but as an elite intelligence operation. When one of their backed startups in San Francisco builds some breakthrough financial technology, the Ayalas immediately import that software to supercharge their banks back in the Philippines, crushing local competitors who have zero access to that kind of tech. And this is where people misjudge old money completely. Everyone assumes ancient dynasties are slow, bloated dinosaurs waiting to go extinct. The Ayalas prove the opposite. The oldest families survive by becoming apex predators, using the American tech ecosystem as their private research lab. The Ayalas deal in code and capital. Our next man deals in something you literally cannot download, no matter how hard you try. Number 6. The Raisin Logistics Monopoly. While Silicon Valley billionaires fight tooth and nail over your digital attention, Enrique Raisin Jr. operates on a completely different and frankly much heavier plane of existence. His wealth isn't built on code. It's built on giant cranes, deep-water docks, and 1,000-ton cargo ships. Razin is the chairman of International Container Terminal Services, one of the largest independent port operators on the entire planet. And his whole fortune comes from one brutal realization. Global trade depends on a tiny handful of physical choke points. You can stream a movie, you can download a game, but you cannot download a shipping container. It has to physically touch land somewhere. So Razin went around the world aggressively grabbing the rights to operate seaports, basically building himself an inescapable toll booth on international commerce. Think about what that means for you specifically. Every time someone in California orders electronics from Asia or machinery from Europe, there's a real statistical chance that Enrique Razin quietly takes a cut of the journey. He's getting paid on movement you didn't even know was happening. And his fortune is protected by the ultimate barrier to entry: sovereign infrastructure. You can't just wake up and decide to build a competing seaport. It takes decades of environmental reviews, billions in concrete, and the direct blessing of national governments. Once Razin locks in a 25-year concession to run a terminal, his cash flow is basically guaranteed, totally immune to whatever software fad is trending this week. And here's the thing the average tech investor never grasps. The digital economy is a beautiful illusion. The internet doesn't float in a vacuum. E-commerce is completely useless without the massive maritime machinery that actually moves the cardboard boxes. Razin doesn't care which app wins the digital war because he owns the physical docks where their server racks get unloaded in the first place. Razin owns the world's choke points. Our next family got so rich they literally ran out of room in their own country and came hunting in ours. Number 5. The Tsai family's American play. Imagine being so wealthy that your home country physically isn't big enough to hold your money anymore. That's not a metaphor. That's the actual problem the Tsai family had to solve. The Tsai family, heirs to the late Henry Tsai, control the SM Group, a retail and banking giant that basically sets the commercial heartbeat of the entire Philippines. They are the undisputed kings of the shopping mall, and we're not talking strip malls. They built malls so enormous they function like self-contained cities, vacuuming up the disposable income of millions of citizens every single weekend. But when your net worth swells into the tens of billions, you hit a wall. There simply isn't enough land back home to keep deploying all that cash. So the Tsai family quietly executes a massive capital flight strategy, and California commercial real estate is a prime target. And here's where they get ruthless. They wait for America to panic. During moments of distress like the 2008 crash or the recent commercial real estate meltdown triggered by high interest rates, they move in with their huge piles of unleveraged cash and scoop up premium office buildings and logistics hubs at fire sale prices, right when local buyers are frozen with fear. The secret weapon is their sense of time. While Wall Street hedge funds are sweating over their next quarterly report, the Tsai family thinks in decades and generations. They can buy a giant commercial complex in California, let it sit half-empty through a recession, and just calmly wait for the cycle to turn. Patience as a weapon, and this is what Americans misunderstand about foreign investment. The Tsai family doesn't see California as a place to live. They see it as a highly regulated safe deposit box for their excess billions, basically running an international private equity fund disguised as a family that sells you sneakers and groceries. The Sis buy buildings. Our next man built something so small you can't even see it, and yet your entire digital life runs on it. Number 4. The Banatao legacy. Long before tech founders became celebrities with documentaries and stadium-sized egos, Dato Banatao was quietly building the actual nervous system of the digital age. In engineering circles, he's revered as one of the founding fathers of the modern semiconductor. And his fingerprints are so deep in Silicon Valley's foundation that you genuinely can't measure his impact. Here's how he did it. Back in the 1980s, personal computers were slow, bulky, clunky machines. Banatao used his brilliant engineering mind to fundamentally change how they processed information, developing the first single-chip 16-bit microprocessor-based calculator and the first Windows graphics accelerator chip. In plain English, he literally shrank the computer and sped it up, making the lightweight laptop you're maybe watching this on physically possible. He co-founded a company called Chips and Technologies and sold it to the manufacturing titan Intel for hundreds of millions, then co-founded S3 Graphics and dominated the early PC graphics market. But here's the pivot that separates the rich from the dynasties. Banatao didn't stay in the lab. He moved up the food chain and became the guy who funds the labs. He founded Tallwood Venture Capital in Palo Alto, pouring his fortune into the next generation of semiconductor and hardware startups, making sure he profits from every single new wave of computing. And that's his ultimate power move, total command over hardware. Because here's a truth the app worshippers forget. Software is completely useless without the physical silicon to run it. By controlling Tallwood, Dato gets to decide which foundational hardware technologies even receive the funding to survive. So here's what modern tech investors get the hierarchy backwards on. They worship the billionaires who built social media apps. They forget that those apps only exist because Banatao engineered the silicon architecture that lets your phone turn on in the first place. His legacy isn't an app, it's the bedrock underneath all of them. Banatao built the chips. Our next person inherited a sinking empire and turned into a financial executioner nobody saw coming. Number 3. The Lewis corporate turnaround. In the ruthless cigar smoke, all-male world of 1990s private equity, one woman pulled off one of the most chilling corporate turnarounds in American financial history. And it started in pure tragedy. Her name is Louisa Nicholas Lewis, and the story begins when her husband, the legendary financier Reginald Lewis, suddenly passed away. He had built TLC Beatrice International into the largest black-owned business in the United States, a massive multinational food and beverage empire. But it had all been built on aggressive leveraged buyouts, which means when Reginald died, the company was drowning in a mountain of high-yield debt. And Wall Street's sharks started circling immediately, fully expecting the grieving widow to panic and sell the empire for pennies. They could not have been more wrong about who they were dealing with. Louisa didn't step aside. She stepped up and took over as CEO, then unleashed a brutal, surgical wave of restructuring. She fired the underperformers, slashed the bloated expenses, and sold off the non-essential European pieces. Then, she took every dollar from those sales and aggressively paid down that suffocating debt, stabilizing the whole thing and protecting her family's billion-dollar legacy. But the move that tells you exactly who she is? When the French government tried to hit TLC Beatrice with an aggressive tax bill, Louisa, who happened to be a razor-sharp bar-certified attorney, did not roll over and pay. She sued the French tax authorities, and she won, saving the company tens of millions of dollars in the process. And here's what the public completely misunderstood about her. They wanted the story of the sad widow who inherited a company. That's not what happened at all. She was a brilliant, cold-blooded financial executioner who outmaneuvered Wall Street insiders, wiped out a mountain of toxic debt, and walked away with a clean, liquid fortune. Underestimating her was the most expensive mistake those men ever made. Lewis outsmarted Wall Street. Our next guy outsmarted Mark Zuckerberg, and he did it with a single word. Number 2. The Murphy Digital Fiefdom. Everyone else on this list deals in something physical, real estate, microchips, cargo ships. Bobby Murphy deals in the most dangerous and valuable commodity of the modern age, human attention. And he controls it for an entire generation. Born in Berkeley, California, to a Filipino mother, Murphy is the co-founder and chief technology officer of Snap, the parent company of Snapchat. With a net worth hovering around $4 billion, he runs his operation out of Venice as one of the quietest, most lethal players in all of consumer tech. And the fortune came from spotting a shift in human psychology that Facebook completely missed. While Facebook was busy forcing everyone into a permanent, searchable public record of their entire lives, Murphy and his co-founder Evan Spiegel wrote the code for the opposite, messages and photos that simply disappeared. That one idea short-circuited the anxiety of the internet and instantly captured the absolute loyalty of every teenager on the planet. But here's where it gets genuinely ruthless. When they took Snap public on the New York Stock Exchange, they pulled the most aggressive governance move in recent Wall Street history. They sold the public non-voting shares. Read that again. Hedge funds and giant institutional investors can buy the stock and eat all the financial risk, but they get absolutely zero say in how the company is run. Murphy and Spiegel kept total dictatorial control. And then there's the moment that defines him. Back in 2013, a young Mark Zuckerberg flew down to Los Angeles and offered $3 billion in cold cash to buy Snapchat. Most people in their early 20s would have fainted, signed, and bought an island. Murphy and Spiegel looked the most powerful man in tech dead in the eye and said no. They bet on their own code instead. And they won. So here's what parents get totally wrong about him. They think Snapchat is a silly app for sending goofy selfies. In reality, Murphy built one of the most sophisticated augmented reality engines and data harvesting machines ever created, quietly controlling how an entire generation communicates with its own eyes. Murphy bet on himself and beat Zuckerberg. But our number one is the one player even Murphy can't compete with, because you can't even find her. Number 1. The Ocampo Ghost Fortune. We finally arrive at the absolute peak of Filipino-American wealth in California, and here's the wild part. If you search her name right now, you'll find almost nothing. No verified social media, no glossy magazine profiles, no clear photographs. Susan Ocampo is the richest Filipina in the entire United States, sitting on an estimated net worth of over $2.3 billion, and she is a total ghost. Which, as you're about to learn, is the whole strategy. Ocampo and her late husband John built this staggering fortune in maybe the most complex corner of the tech world, radio frequency semiconductors. They co-founded a company called Sirenza Microdevices, steered it through a massive IPO, and sold it for hundreds of millions. But that was just the warm-up act. Through their private investment vehicle, GAAS Labs, they orchestrated a brilliant series of acquisitions and ultimately became the largest individual shareholders and board members of MACOM Technology Solutions, a colossal chip maker on the NASDAQ with a market value north of $10 billion. And here's the genius of the invisibility. In an era obsessed with selfies, personal brands, and public validation, Ocampo figured out that fame is actually a liability. Think about it. You can't protest a billionaire you can't identify. You can't target a CEO whose face you've never seen. By deliberately erasing herself from the digital world, she shielded her family and her assets from all the scrutiny and pressure that constantly hammers loud, high-profile founders. And the technology she controls is the perfect cover. MACOM doesn't build flashy consumer apps or smartphones. They build the deeply complex, highly classified chip architecture behind aerospace systems, military radar, and global telecommunications. She literally owns the invisible signals that let the modern world talk to itself. So here's the final lesson, the thing everyone gets wrong about the very top of wealth. The media glorifies the loud billionaires who buy social media platforms and launch rockets. Susan Ocampo proves that real, absolute power doesn't beg for attention. The ultimate luxury in California isn't a jet or a Malibu mansion. It's total, impenetrable invisibility. And those were the 10 richest Filipino families in California. From the docks moving global trade to the invisible chips powering military radar, these families bypassed the usual American gatekeepers and built untouchable empires hiding in plain sight. So which of these quiet monopolies surprised you the most? The augmented reality fiefdom or the completely invisible semiconductor ghost? Drop it in the comments, smash that like button if any of this blew your mind, and don't forget to subscribe to Global Status, because we track the money so you don't have to.